She didn't do it for recognition, she didn't even know his name. What could a late-night kindness unlock? All she did was unlock her laundromat one rainy night for a quiet man who folded his clothes like they were part of a memory. 3 days later, a Navy honor guard came to find her, not to ask for anything, just to say, "We never forget the ones who don't forget us." This is the story of a small act that changed everything. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Seabrook, Maine wasn't the kind of place that changed much. The sea came and went, the wind rustled the crabgrass along the dunes, and the locals, fishermen, waitresses, and retirees, kept the same routines they'd followed for decades. And on the corner of Ash and 7th Street, tucked between a shuttered video store and a bait shop that never quite made it through the off-season, sat Seaside Wash and Dry, the last coin laundromat in town. Rachel Thomas, age 42, had unlocked that same blue door every morning. For the past 9 years, same jingling bell, same salt-stained floor, same beat-up neon sign that flickered the word open like it was out of breath. The laundromat used to belong to her father, Petty Officer Alan Thomas, U.S. Navy, retired. He'd opened it in the 80s after 20 years at sea. Said he wanted a place where things got clean, where folks could come in carrying something heavy and leave a little lighter. He died in 2014, cancer, and Rachel, who had been working 2 jobs and dodging grief, came home, took over the shop, and never left again. She didn't have kids, didn't have time for a husband. She had quarters to roll, belts to replace, lint traps to clean, and taxes that got harder every year. And lately, business was down. No one used laundromats anymore, not if they could help it. Most of the town's old renters had moved or upgraded to apartments with in-unit washers. Tourists did not stop here. They blew past Seabrook for the bigger beach towns 10 miles south. Every week, Rachel thought about closing. But every Monday morning, she counted the quarters again, checked the balance in her worn-out business account, and found just enough reason to keep going one more week. That night, it was raining, the kind of rain that rolls in heavy from the Atlantic, thick with salt and cold enough to sting your fingers. Rachel had just locked up for the day. 10:03 p.m., same as always. She turned off the lights inside except for the ones in the back hallway, grabbed her coat, slid the register drawer into the safe, then turned toward the front window, and that's when she saw him, an old man sitting on the bench just outside, still as stone, head down, shoulders hunched beneath a heavy green coat that looked 2 sizes too big. A canvas duffel bag rested beside his boots, soaked through. He wasn't smoking, wasn't asking for anything, wasn't looking at his phone either, which somehow made him stand out even more. Rachel hesitated. She flipped off the last switch, double-checked her keys, and stepped out into the rain, pulling her hood up tight. He didn't move. As she passed him, she paused. Something about his posture, not pitiful, just patient. "Evening," she said, voice cautious. He looked up slowly, eyes sharp, alert, but tired. "Evening," he echoed. She started to keep walking. "But didn't you waiting on someone?" she asked. "No ma'am, you okay?" "Yes, ma'am." Silence, just the rain pattering on the sidewalk and the buzz of the neon sign going dim behind her. Rachel shifted her weight. "The laundromat's closed," she said. "We close at 10 o'clock. "I know." She glanced down. His bag was unzipped slightly, and she saw the edge of a balled-up sweatshirt, a shirt, a towel. Everything inside looked clean, bare, but tired like him. He hadn't asked for anything, and yet Rachel felt it in her gut, that quiet little pull, the one she tried to ignore most days, because listening to it usually meant trouble. But that voice, the one that sounded like her father's, was louder tonight. "If you see someone who's walked a long way and no one's bothered to stop, maybe you're meant to be the one who does." She looked at the man again. "I could open up," she said softly, "just for a bit." He didn't nod, didn't thank her. He just stood slow but steady, and picked up the bag with both hands like it mattered to him, like it was more than laundry. Inside, she only turned on half the lights. "Dryers in the back run better than the front," she said, unlocking the change machine. "Floors are still wet. Watch your step." He nodded. She handed him a small stack of quarters. "On the house," she added. "Still, no thanks." But he met her gaze, and in his eyes was something deeper than gratitude, respect. He didn't waste time, didn't shuffle. He moved like a man who knew how to take orders and didn't need small talk. He loaded his clothes with care, whites, darks, folded, separate. No fumbling, no hesitation. His hands were calloused, movements neat, efficient. Rachel busied herself wiping the folding tables near the front, pretending not to watch him, but she noticed things. He never looked at his phone, never sat down, and when the spin cycle finished, he folded every item like it was going back into a sea bag. When he was done, he took a towel from his own duffel and wiped down the inside of the dryer, then the folding table, then the little puddle near the vending machine that wasn't even his, and then quietly, he slipped out the door without a word, just a nod, a small one. Rachel stood behind the counter, unsure what had just happened. A stranger, a cold night, a load of clothes, no request, no complaint, no name, just presence. She waited another minute, then locked the door again. The next morning, the rain had stopped, the air smelled of salt and wood smoke, and Rachel, still tired from closing late, thought of the old man once, maybe twice, while scrubbing out the detergent trays, but by lunch, it faded. The dryer spun and customers came and went and the world kept turning. She figured that night had been what it was, a moment of kindness, a quiet footnote, until 3 days later, when 3 black SUVs rolled up in front of Seaside Wash and Dry, and the first man out was wearing navy dress whites. What could a Navy honor guard want with a small laundromat? Rachel froze mid-mop, the bell above the door jingled and 6 men stepped inside, not angry, not rushed, just calm, purposeful to formal. At their center stood a tall officer, silver insignia gleaming, holding a small wooden box. "Miss Thomas?" he asked. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Yes," she said finally, her voice small. The man nodded once. "We'd like a moment of your time," and just like that, everything changed. But that's a story for another day. For now, all she had done was open a door, and someone had remembered. Rachel didn't move. The officer in white stood calmly in front of her, sunlight glinting off the brass buttons on his jacket. The others formed a quiet line behind him. 6 Navy men, as solemn, composed, as if they were stepping into a chapel, not a laundromat with cracked tiles and faded detergent posters. Rachel blinked, gripping the mop handle like it might anchor her to reality. "Miss Thomas," the man repeated, a voice low but clear, "we're here on behalf of the United States Navy and someone who recently passed through your door." Rachel felt her breath catch, her hands went cold. "The man who came here 3 nights ago," the officer continued. "His name was Captain Douglas Monroe, retired, former commanding officer, Naval Special Warfare Group 5". He paused, letting that settle. Rachel could only nod. "We know he didn't introduce himself," the officer added. "That was part of his way. Since leaving the service, he lived off-grid, refused support, refused contact. But after his visit here, something changed." Rachel's voice finally found its way out. "He didn't even say his name," she whispered. "I just let him in. He looked like he'd been walking for miles." The officer nodded. He had. Captain Monroe was a decorated combat leader, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart. He led missions few people will ever read about, but in the end, what he remembered most wasn't the medals. He looked at her, steady. It was kindness. They didn't stay long, they didn't crowd her, they didn't ask for attention. Instead, the officer gently stepped forward and placed a small square package on the folding table beside her, wrapped in dark navy cloth, tied with a single white ribbon. Rachel untied it with trembling fingers. Inside was a plaque, polished bronze, heavy in her hands. At the top, Monroe's honor corner. Beneath it, engraved in clean, even lettering, "A place of quiet respect, in memory of Captain Douglas Monroe, USN, in gratitude for those who see the forgotten." Rachel stared at it, her throat tightened. I don't know what to say," she murmured. The officer gave her a quiet smile. "You don't have to say anything." Later that day, they stayed behind, helped her mount the plaque on the far wall above the second folding table where Monroe had folded his laundry in silence. They cleaned the glass of the front windows, repaired a faulty dryer fan without being asked. One of the younger sailors mopped the entryway while another restocked the change machine with quarters from his own pocket. Rachel just watched. There was no ceremony, no music, just presence, and hands that worked. And when they finished, the officer turned to her once more. "We'd like to propose something, if you're willing," he said. "Our regional base is partnering with veteran outreach groups. They've been looking for community locations, places that feel really familiar, not clinical, not cold." He looked around the laundromat. This place felt like that to him, safe, quiet, dignified. Rachel blinked. "You mean, like a donation drop-off?" He shook his head gently. "More than that, a place for homeless veterans to wash their clothes, sit down, breathe. We provide the funding, a modest monthly stipend, volunteers, too. All we ask is the space." Rachel hesitated. She looked around her little shop, the scratched counters, the flickering ceiling light, the sticky note on the breaker box reminding her not to run dryers 3 and 6 at the same time. "I'm barely keeping the lights on as it is," she said quietly. "Some days I'm not sure I can keep the doors open." The officer nodded. "And still, you opened it for him. That's why we're here." "But I didn't do anything," she said, her voice catching. "He didn't even say thank you. He just folded his clothes and left." The officer's voice softened. "He didn't say thank you out loud, but the next morning, he walked onto base for the first time in 6 years, handed over his ID, said he was ready to talk." Rachel's heart pounded. "He passed away 2 days later." The officer added, "Heart failure, quiet, peaceful, but he made one last request." He paused, reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, creased, handwritten, bearing the sharp, deliberate strokes of someone used to signing orders. This is what he wrote. He handed it to her. Rachel unfolded it slowly. "If I don't make it, tell the woman at the laundromat she reminded me what dignity feels like. Tell her I remembered who I was when I stood under those fluorescent lights folding clean socks. I left the Navy, but I never wanted to be forgotten. She didn't forget me. That's all I needed." Rachel swallowed hard. Tears blurred the words. The officer said nothing more, just let the silence hold. That night, long after they'd gone, Rachel stayed behind in the shop. She didn't sweep, didn't check receipts. She just stood by the plaque, ran her fingers gently along the metal, still warm from the drill, and thought about how many times she'd almost closed for good, how close she'd come to giving up, to believing the world no longer needed places like this. Places That smelled of fabric softener and bleach in stories no one ever told out loud. The plaque didn't flash, didn't buzz, didn't earn her a dime, but somehow it made the place feel full again, like someone was still sitting there, just out of sight, folding clothes with calloused hands, remembering who he used to be. The next morning Rachel arrived at the laundromat early. A new sign had been installed overnight. She hadn't even heard them. It was mounted just beneath the old neon open sign, etched in clean steel lettering, in partnership with Naval Veteran Outreach, Community Access Point number 47, all veterans welcome, no questions, no charge. She stood on the sidewalk, coffee in hand, watching the early light reflect off the lettering. For a moment, she didn't feel tired, didn't feel like she was losing something. She felt connected. No one had asked her to make this a mission, no one told her to carry anyone else's weight, but they came back anyway. Not to demand anything, just to say, we never forget the ones who didn't forget us. It started quietly, just a handwritten sign taped to the front window. Veterans Hour, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 11 p.m., free wash and dry for all service members, no questions asked. Rachel didn't make a big announcement, she didn't tell the paper, didn't post on Facebook, she just kept the lights on 2 hours longer. Brewed a fresh pot of coffee and left the door unlocked for anyone who needed a clean shirt and a bit of dignity. At first, it was only one man, then two. Word traveled fast in those circles, the ones who slept under bridges, behind warehouses, in shelters too crowded to offer real rest. She learned their names, or rather the names they gave her. She didn't pry. There was Rick, who folded every t-shirt like it was headed for inspection, George, who whistled Navy tunes while drying socks, and Elena, a Marine with calloused hands and a backpack that never left her side. Rachel brought in extra chairs, left out granola bars, added a shelf of gently used jackets in the corner marked, take if needed. The Navy kept their word. A quiet stipend arrived by mail each month. More volunteers began to trickle in, some veterans, some just neighbors who wanted to help. For a time, it felt like something sacred had taken root beneath those humming machines, but not everyone saw it that way. It began with a voice. A man in khakis and sunglasses stood near the back folding station one afternoon, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like he was searching for something to disapprove of. Rachel noticed him watching Elena fold her jacket, watched him glance toward Rick, who stood by dryer number 4, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup marked USN. The man whispered to the woman next to him, loud enough for Rachel to hear, I didn't come here to do laundry next to the shelter crowd. The woman didn't reply, she just looked at her shoes. Rachel stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. They served this country, she said. They've earned a warm place to fold their socks. The man didn't reply, just smirked and pulled out his phone. By the next morning, a video was online, shaky camera footage of Elena humming near the vending machine, a sleeping bag poking out of her backpack, the caption hastily typed in red font, would you feel safe washing your kids' clothes here? The comments came fast, some angry, some defensive, but many cruel. This is why people don't go to places like that anymore. These people should be in a shelter, not a laundromat. She's going to lose that business if she keeps this up. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She sat at the back counter scrolling through the comments, her fingers shaking. The next day, fewer customers came. By Thursday, one of the newer volunteers texted to say she couldn't continue. Sorry. Rachel kept showing up anyway, so did Rick and George and Elena, and then on Saturday morning, another video appeared. It was simple, grainy cell phone footage, no editing, no background music, just a man in a worn-out veteran cap standing in front of Seaside Wash and Dry. His name was Henry, 81, Army medic, Vietnam, 67 to 69. He stood with both hands on his cane and looked straight into the camera, voice steady, eyes wet. I've slept in more alleys than I care to count, I've lost more friends than I'll ever have again, but last week, I walked into this laundromat and the woman behind the counter looked me in the eye and asked if I wanted coffee, not charity, not pity, just respect, and I realized I haven't felt that in 18 years. So if anyone out there's got a problem with veterans being treated like human beings, I don't think the problem's in this laundromat, I think it's in your heart. The video was barely 2 minutes long, but it spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, a group of students from the local college dropped off 5 crates of hygiene kits, soap, toothpaste, razors, notes of encouragement scribbled in marker. A church youth group showed up with bagged lunches labeled, thank you for your service. A local appliance store called, offering to donate 3 brand new washers. A retired contractor offered to fix the leaky roof for free. My dad was Navy, he said, I owe him this. By the end of the week, the folding table beneath the plaque read, donated socks, all sizes, toiletry shelf, take what you need. Veteran resource binder, updated weekly. Rachel stood behind the counter as people came in, not to complain, but to help. She watched as a mother knelt to help her son tuck a granola bar into the donation bin, watched Elena laugh for the first time in weeks, playing cards with 2 old Marines near the detergent shelf. The laundromat had changed, but not because Rachel asked it to, because people had decided kindness deserved a second look. Then came the invitation. A cream-colored envelope embossed with gold lettering, from the Maine Naval Heritage Museum. Inside, a formal card is stamped, signed, "We respectfully invite Miss Rachel Thomas to speak at the annual Naval Recognition Ceremony at the Heritage Hall, Portland, Maine. Your work has become a model of quiet service. We would be honored to hear your story." Rachel read it 3 times, then quietly folded the letter and placed it in her top drawer. She didn't reply, didn't go shopping for a new dress, didn't prepare a speech. Because she didn't want the spotlight, she wanted to keep the machines running, keep the coffee warm, keep the door unlocked just a little longer. But on the evening of the ceremony, as the brass band warmed up in Heritage Hall and the host stepped to the microphone to announce a name, Rachel's seat in the front row was empty. Murmurs rippled through the audience until the back doors opened and a man stepped in, not part of the schedule, not announced, dressed in a faded navy field jacket, a sea bag slung over one shoulder. His gray hair trimmed neat, his back straighter than it had been in years. Captain Douglas Munro, alive, present, quiet. He walked slowly to the podium and placed something on it, a coin, then reached into his duffel and pulled out a folded garment, an old laundromat uniform, blue, stitched at the chest. Rachel, washed, pressed, folded perfectly. He looked out over the audience and said simply, "She didn't want the microphone, but I owe her my voice." Captain Munro never spoke for long. He didn't need to. That night at the Navy Heritage Hall, he simply stood in Rachel's place and told them the truth about a woman who opened a door, about a laundromat where no one was turned away, about dignity restored quietly between spin cycles and folding tables. When he was done, he stepped back from the microphone, saluted the room, and left without waiting for applause. He caught the last train back to Seabrook, and the next morning, just like always, he was there by 9 a.m., sweeping leaves off the front step of the laundromat he now called home. 2 months later, the name above the shop changed. The old flickering sign was taken down. In its place, brushed steel lettering, polished by hand, "Munro's Honor Wash and Dry," in service to those who served. Rachel hadn't asked for it, but the Navy insisted. So did the town. They said the place had earned its name just like he had. Beneath the new sign, etched into the window in fine gold print, were a few smaller words: "Not every war ends on the battlefield, but every healing begins somewhere warm inside." Not much changed at first. The machines still hummed, the detergent still clumped in the same corners, but now there was something new in the back right corner: a small desk, 2 donated laptops, and a bulletin board with neatly pinned forms. Above it, a simple wooden sign: Veteran Resource Station, assistance with VA registration, ID replacement, discharge papers, and more. Twice a week, a VA liaison sat behind the desk. Her name was Carla. She brought her own thermos and greeted every visitor with a welcome back, even if it was their first time through the door. And every Tuesday and Thursday night, the Veterans Hour still held its place. The coffee never ran out, the folding chairs were always out, the door never locked early. The Navy kept their promise, too. A quarterly grant came in like clockwork, enough to cover utilities, repairs, and even the new industrial dryer the team had affectionately nicknamed the Beast. When Rachel tried to refuse the extra funds, the regional liaison just smiled. "This isn't charity," he said, "it's investment in someone who already did the work." So she accepted quietly and got back to mopping the floors. One rainy Thursday, a plain white envelope showed up in the mail, no postage, just her name: Miss Rachel Thomas, Seabrook, Maine. Inside, heavy cardstock, Navy seal, gold leaf, and a handwritten signature at the bottom: "In recognition of exceptional community service and compassionate reintegration support, the Department of the Navy hereby designates Rachel Thomas as an honorary civilian contributor to veteran reintegration. Your quiet actions reached further than our loudest awards ever could." There was no check, no medal, just a certificate folded carefully between protective sleeves. Rachel stared at it a long time before sliding it into a simple black frame and mounting it above the old coin machine. Time moved forward, but some things stayed. George still came every Thursday. Rick taught a younger vet how to balance a checkbook. Elena got housing through a contact at the VA desk and came back the next week with donuts. And Captain Munro, he never left. He didn't sleep in the alley anymore. He slept in a small room above the laundromat, a cot, a desk, a window facing the sea. He worked the night shift, cleaned the filters, restocked the soap, and every morning before he left to walk the coastline, he wiped down the plaque near the folding table, the one that bore his name, not because he needed the reminder, but because he wanted to keep it clean for her. One Saturday morning, just at dawn, a young soldier stepped out of the laundromat, fatigue pants, civilian jacket, a duffel slung over his shoulder, straps worn from travel. He paused just outside the door, turned back, and looked up. The early sun caught the words above the entrance: "Munro's Honor Wash and Dry, in service to those who served." Then his eyes fell to the window, to the smaller line beneath it. He read it once, then again: "Not every war ends on the battlefield, but every healing begins somewhere warm." He took a slow breath, then kept walking, a little taller than before. Later that week, a girl about 12 brought her grandfather in, said he used to serve, said he didn't like hospitals or forms or lines. He didn't speak much, but when he left, he slipped a $5 bill into the tip jar and whispered, "You run a sacred place here." Rachel only nodded. She didn't need words. The walls were already full of them, quiet ones, folded into socks and stitched into old uniforms. They say the heart of a town is its school or It's church or it's square, but in Seabrook, Maine, it was a laundromat where the washers never stopped humming, where coffee always tasted slightly burnt but was always hot, and where every person who walked through the door, uniformed or not, was seen, heard, respected, because one woman, tired, quiet, unseen, had once opened her door long after closing, just once, but it was enough. And so in that small coastal town where the wind carried salt and stories, where grief sat beside hope, folded into every worn flannel and field jacket, a simple building became something more, a landmark not built of stone or brick, but of grace, of remembrance, of dignity, washed warm and spun dry forever. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.